Welcome to the Marquis Masters Podcast. I'm Ryan Estes. And today's guest is D.W. Duke, an attorney, author, board member, and film producer who's asking a dangerously simple question. What if the world isn't short of opinions, but short on empathy? Because D.W. has spent decades in law and human rights work, and he's not writing fluffy inspiration. He's writing stories that force you to look at injustice up close. A true case where a trial lasted 1 hour, a jury deliberated for 4 minutes, and 15,000 people showed up to witness a lynching in Waco, Texas. Heavy, necessary, and somehow he brings it back to something hopeful. That empathy can be taught like a skill, the same way he earned a 5th degree black belt in Taekwondo and a 6th degree in a fighting-focused branch that's built for real-world combat. In this episode, you'll hear the wild through line between martial arts discipline, courtroom-level accuracy, and biographical novels that span Duke University's legacy, Holocaust resistance, civil rights, and even a what-if future conflict in the Middle East. If you're big into ideas, hard truths, and stories that actually change how you see people, this one's for you. For more on D.W. Duke and other incredible leaders, go explore MarquisWho'sWho.com. And if you want the rabbit hole to keep going, MarquisWho'sWho.com is where the deeper dossiers live. And hey, if this episode hits you, leave a review like you're awarding a black belt. Honest, specific, and earned. And now my conversation with D.W. Duke. D.W., welcome to the Marquis Masters Podcast. Thanks for joining me.
Pleasure. Good to be here.
It's a pleasure to meet you, and it was really exciting getting to know you a little bit by doing some research. You know, I'm really excited to talk about your career and your work. You got everything from board member to director, author. I can't wait to talk about your books. But one thing that jumped out at me that maybe we can lead with is you're a 5th degree black belt in Taekwondo. Tell me about that.
Okay. Well, when I was in high school, I took a class in a local dojo that the high school was offering credit for it. So I got into it. I really enjoyed it. At that time, you know, Taekwondo, martial arts in general, was still kind of a new thing in the United States. But I happened to get into Taekwondo, which was the right move because that turned out to be the prevalent system. So I got in Taekwondo. I stayed in it for many years, got a 5th degree black belt in Taekwondo, 6th degree black belt in Jiu Jitsu. And I've been active my whole adult life in martial arts. So I enjoyed it, and I think it really has a good effect to help keep a person balanced in life. And I appreciate it for that reason as well.
I agree. I'm a fellow martial artist. You said Jiu Jitsu.
Yes.
I'm much familiar with that style. Talk to me about that a little bit.
It's Taekwondo. Primarily, it's also with the World Federation or World Taekwondo. It is primarily grandmasters who have a school. It's one of the original Taekwondo schools. And what they did, they've grown up separately. So you have your separate schools within World Taekwondo. So this is another division of Taekwondo. The focus, though, is more on actual fighting as opposed to, the general Taekwondo that we pursue is, the Olympic sport, more or less, and we follow the Olympic rules. But Jiu Jitsu focuses on actual fighting. So it's a little bit of a different focus, but it's still a form of Taekwondo.
Interesting. Yeah, because I always think of Taekwondo kind of as the big dramatic spinning kicks.
Yes.
You know?
Yes, we do. My favorite kick is the backspin kick. So that catches everybody off guard.
It's a powerful kick right there.
Yes.
So Jiu Jitsu would be kind of like closer combat maybe, and like little mild grappling and things like that.
Right. You'll have more grappling and more actual techniques it's a lethal form of martial art, but it's used for self-defense and actual military fighting.
Incredible. I love it. Let's talk a little bit about your career. Now, you've got decades of legal experience in professional liabilities, business litigation, real estate, human rights advocacy. So when you're with your law practice, what's kind of your preferred category, I suppose, to practice?
Well, realistically, I enjoy the human rights work the most, and what I do mostly for that is writing literature, books, and articles and things, because we have an international criminal court and so on, but it's not really set up in a way that we use it like we do our state courts or our federal courts in the United States. So we operate a different way, but that would be my primary interest would be human rights, and my areas of practice include real estate, business, and professional liability. but human rights and civil rights is my focus.
Let's hang on that civil rights a little bit. I read something that you frame empathy as a strategic and moral imperative to overcoming conflict and discrimination, not just a feel good quality. Maybe talk a little bit about your experience with empathy.
Well, it's very interesting because if a person looks at every major religion in the world, and I'm talking about, for example, in Judaism, Rabbi Hillel said, "That which is hurtful to you, do not do to your brother." Christianity says, "Do unto others as you would have them do unto you." Islam has the doctrine of reciprocity, which is essentially treat others the way you would want to be treated. In Hinduism, Buddhism, and Zoroastrianism, you have the concept of karma. So while these religions have so much conflict and so much going on, it's ironic that the core tenet in all of the major religions is empathy. But we don't usually speak of it in that way. We don't usually think of it in that way. And so what I've been working on is a series of books that will begin in grade school all the way through high school that classes in empathy so that children learn what empathy really means. And most people think it's not something that people they normally don't possess, they normally don't have. It's largely a function of teaching. And I believe that if children were taught, before I do something, think about how it will affect other people. If I'm going to say this, how would this affect that person? Would that make that person feel bad? And learning to think about how another person feels. After a person incorporates this into his life, they reach the point where they actually become happy when other people succeed, when they see other people have success and happiness. That is where I believe we should be. That is where human beings should be. Right now, we're far away from that. We're obviously much better off than we were thousands of years ago in terms of treatment of fellow man, but we're a long ways away from having that empathy where it's true empathy as opposed to simply knowing we should do something and not really do it. It's a matter of really understanding. And of course, it's different from sympathy because sympathy, that's too late. That's after the injury has occurred and now you're sympathetic for an injured person. Empathy gets in front of it, gets in front of the pain, gets in front of whatever is harmful and says, you know what, if we treat each other the right way, it'll be a much better world. And I really believe that this can happen if it develops. We get a good curriculum, and I noticed that some universities have started teaching college students courses on empathy because more and more people are getting to understand this fundamental principle.
Yeah, and I'm curious if some of your insights on empathy came from martial arts, because it becomes a little bit harder to punch somebody in the mouth when you've been punched in the mouth a couple times.
Yes. Well, martial arts, what that teaches you is to remain in control, to remain with your thought process intact. And when you do that, if you suppose you're in a self-defense situation, you know what the appropriate response is. You know what would be the appropriate amount of force to use to an attack. That's a form of empathy. You know what you should be doing in response because you're thinking about how it would affect the other person. So I would say yes, because it allows you to slow down and remain in control, it does enhance empathy that a person would have.
Percent. Yeah, you have the golden rule, and then you have the Mike Tyson rule, which is everyone has a plan until you've been punched in the mouth.
Right.
Different
Different ways of looking at it. Yeah. Yeah.
Awesome. I would love to talk about your books. And you
Okay.
have 5 books, and maybe what I'll do is just bring them up here, and we can kind of have you walk through and give us an overview of each. Would that be a good way to do it?
That would be fine. Sure.
Okay, great. Let's do that. I'm going to just pull it up here. I took the liberty to make a little web app with your book covers
Okay.
for our conversation. So, which would you like to kind of give us an overview first?
Why don't we start with the Duke legacy? We can take them in sequence. So the Duke legacy is about the family that established Duke University. One of my ancestors was the uncle of Washington Duke, after whom the university is named. So I had a lot of information about the family and what they had done. Washington Duke was a fascinating man, and he was a person who grew up in the slave era, but he was always opposed to slavery. So he tried to navigate and negotiate that course in life, and he was a very compassionate person, wanted to do things that benefited people in a positive way, and of course he built financial empires, and his sons took it further with Duke Energy and so on. But to me, the greatest accomplishment of the family was Duke University. Duke University of course, everybody that loves basketball is into Duke University, but the university itself is a great institution. I believe was a very good result of the result of what Washington Duke did.
Incredible. And did you attend Duke University?
No, I didn't, but I do go back there frequently for functions and to do things. But I went to Michigan and then I went to Washington University for law school.
Do you have a Cooper flag jersey?
Do I? No,
Do you?
no, I don't.
Yeah. What an incredible legacy. Yeah, I mean, Duke, I was gonna ask about that because, that is my association immediately, is Duke basketball. What an incredible program. Very proud franchise.
Oh yeah.
Okay, what would be the next book we should review?
The one right next to it, Not Without a Fight. And these are based on true stories, by the way. Not Without a Fight is based upon a young man. He was 8 years old when Germany invaded Poland in 1939. And by the time he was 10, he was a sniper for the Jewish resistance. His grandfather was a major in the Polish army and had taught him how to use a weapon, how to use a rifle. And so the book takes him through his entire experience during the entire period of the occupation by the Nazis. And he managed to survive. And so we talk about all the things that he experienced in his life and during the war and what he did. It was an amazing story because he was a child soldier who actually accomplished a lot for the resistance.
Incredible. Is this a novel or is this nonfiction?
It's a biographical novel, the same as the
Great.
Duke Legacy. Yes, they're biographical novels. So the reason I like to put them in biographical novel form is so people can enjoy them as opposed to reading a history book. Many people tell me that they relate to it much better that way, and then it can also be made into a motion picture much easier when it's in a novel format.
Yeah, and I saw that's also a part of kind of your media company that you've created is the film aspect. So are you
Yes.
working on adaptations for Hollywood films, feature films?
Yes, yes. All of my books have screenplays except the very last one on the end. And we'll talk about that. That's the one coming out in January or this month. Um, Not Without a Fight. My cousin, the person the book is about, is actually a distant cousin of mine. And his son is the co-author, Thomas Bieberstein. He was the co-author on the book. Today he goes by Biebers. They dropped the Steen from their family because they didn't want people to know that they were Jewish after they came, here from the Holocaust. So he goes by Biebers, but he owns a production company called B&B Production, and he is doing documentary films about people who were survivors or family members of people who were victims of the Holocaust. And we're doing quite a few of those. We've done. I work with him on those. We recently did one with Jennifer Kaplan as one of the deans at Duke Law School. We recently did one involving a couple of universities out here. So they're turned into a pretty good project, documentaries essentially.
Yeah, incredible. A movie about a 9-year-old sniper in the Jewish resistance. That sounds like a pretty good movie. Pretty heavy,
Yeah,
I guess, obviously.
yes, it would be. It was a traumatic
Yeah,
experience for the people that went through that. Absolutely.
yeah. Biographical novels, and, I really like that too because with the liberty as an author, you can really, paint the picture, so to speak,
Right.
emotionally and also the environment, what's your favorite thing about writing and maybe a little bit about your process? Are you kind of like an hour in the morning kind of guy, or when do you get the time in?
I just kind of usually I tend to just go nonstop. I just start going and, and just keep writing. If I try to do it like an hour a day, I can't get my thoughts together. Excuse me. So I like to maybe take an afternoon and work, until evening on it, 5 or 6 hours at a time. And I like to think the process through. Sometimes I go to bed and think about what I'm going to write the next day. So that tends to be how I do it.
You kind of find what they call like a flow state?
Flow state, yeah, I do. And I think that one of the things that I try to focus on is trying to remain as close to history as possible. I try to keep it as accurately, historically as accurate as possible. Sometimes you don't always have enough information, so you have to try to deduce what occurred in a certain situation. But that's the important thing when you're writing this kind of book, is to make sure it's historically accurate, in my opinion.
100%. Are there ways that or techniques you have to kind of anchor it historically, whether it's like, I imagine like looking at Google Maps and finding neighborhoods and landmarks and key dates and things like that?
It takes a lot of research. For example, on Not Without a
Yeah.
Fight, of course, I interviewed Cass Bieberstein, who the book's about. I interviewed him a number of times, and his son, of course, wrote with me on the book. And so he did most of the research, gathering photos and everything that went with it. But yes, it involved extensive research, interviews, the Shoah Project, quite a bit, quite a bit. I would say that book took longest of what any I've done so far because of the amount of research that went into it.
Incredible. Great. Which book should we look at next?
Let's look at Because I'm Black, that one right there. Now, this book is it's causes quite a bit of controversy because people say, "Well, what's this about? And are you going to be stirring up more racial conflict by writing a book like this?" That was one of the questions that a lot of people ask me. But when people actually read the book, they change their mind. They say, "Oh, this is not just a book about racism. This is about a travesty of justice." I wrote this book with a young man from West Africa named Taekwondo Hungbi, who is he's an expert in the Jim Crow era and the Atlantic slave trade. And we were working on, I had written a magazine article about the book and was getting ready, I wrote a magazine article about the story, and I was getting ready to write the book, and I decided to invite him to participate. So he's my co-author on this one. And what we discovered was some really amazing things that are very disturbing, but it was apparently what existed at that time. In my opinion, I've looked at the court transcript. I've done a lot of research. I believe he was innocent. I don't believe he had anything to do with this crime. But in essence, the woman where he was working as a sharecropper, the farmer's wife, she was murdered. And he was blamed for it and arrested. And he was supposed to have 30 days to prepare a defense. They gave him 1 week. He didn't have enough time to even prepare a defense. And there were so many things, there were so many problems with the case. For one thing, there was a confession by another man, a white man confessed to killing her. And this was completely ignored by the law enforcement officers. They got a confession from Jesse, and he couldn't read or write, but they got him to sign a confession with an X. He put an X on it. And when we look at the confession in retrospect, we found out that many things he confessed to did not even happen. So we know that the confession was false. Then we look at the way he was arrested. We look at all these other factors. But one of the things that stood out in my mind the most is that after the murder supposedly occurred around noon, he stayed and plowed the field for 5 hours and then came walking up to the farmhouse. Well, when somebody murders somebody, they don't stay and plow a field. They run. He had a truck. He could have driven all the way to Mexico by the time anybody even found the body. So that was another problem. There are just many, many things with this case that I felt that really needed to come out, and the people needed to see it. They needed to see what happens when justice goes awry. And, we learn from the mistakes of history, but if we don't know history, we don't learn. And that's why I think this is an important book. Similar to To Kill a Mockingbird, only that was fiction. This is a true story, but it has that important effect in my view.
Yeah, and true crime stories right now are extremely popular,
Yes.
particularly in the podcast genre here. I mean, the true crime popularity might equal all the other podcasts put together.
Yeah.
There's a hunger for that, particularly around social and racial injustice. And I wonder why that is. So maybe DW, is kind of racial and social injustice so important to you?
Well, I think in part it's because as a person who works in constitutional law and human rights, I'm concerned about people who are mistreated. And historically, certain races have been mistreated more than other races. And one of them, of course, are the Jewish people. Another one, of course, is the Black people. Another, of course, is the Native American. These are people that are mistreated. And those are the stories that we look at to identify cases that are sufficiently noteworthy and could be corrected if we knew in advance. If it happened again today, we would know, let's not make the same mistake. So I think the reason that certain races have a special impact in my work is because I'm writing about the people who have been disadvantaged or who have been mistreated in the human rights aspect.
Yeah, 100%. And it's, I mean, it's a beautiful cover. It's just haunting and horrible. These stories are kind of hard to sit with. Like, maybe perhaps your experience as a lawyer and attorney, but how do you deal with kind of the big emotions and big feelings that come out of, I'm sure, working on a novel around the subject?
Well, mostly it's difficult to believe, and I've done a lot of work in the
Yeah.
Middle East. I dealt with the government of Iran. Things that they do are just, it's hard to believe that people would do these kinds of things. And by the way, you see all of the people in the background in this on this cover. This cover was created by an artist named Taisha Law. And there's a symbol there because there were actually 15,000 people who were present when he was lynched, tortured and lynched, who stood and watched the entire event occur. And
Did you
that's
say
why she put
15,000?
15,000 in Waco, Texas in 1916. 15,000. They let children out of school to come and watch. It was just a bizarre something. You look at that and you say, how on earth did that happen in the United States in the 20th century? It's hard to believe. It's like something you'd expect in ancient Rome, but it happened right here in the United States during the trial. The trial only lasted 1 hour, and the jury was out for 4 minutes. And when they came back in, the judge barely finished recording the verdict, and the crowd rushed forward. All of the law enforcement officers and the judge ran out the back door, and they grabbed this guy, pulled him out in the street. They tortured him terribly, and then they lynched him. They literally burned him, essentially cooked him alive in a fire for 2 hours. And I think he was innocent. That's the real tragedy. And a lot of people, when they see I get a lot of strange comments from people on Facebook when they see the book, just they have no idea what it's about. But I can see why we still have racial tension in America when I see the comments that people make. Some of them are very compassionate, and other people are just automatically, oh, he deserved it, or he stole my bike, things like that. And you look at that and say, how is this happening even today? And that is what I mean. We lack empathy in the world today. We just lack empathy.
Yeah, in one sense, you think about something like that happening, 15,000 people, and you think that, boy, we've come a long way. But like to your point, you look at the comment section in YouTube videos, and you might disagree. Do you believe today's political and racial discourse is fundamentally different from the past, or are we repeating old conflicts with new terms?
Well, I think there's two things going on. I think there are many people who genuinely care about racial issues and what's happening to certain people, certain races. But I think there's also a huge portion of our population that is using it as a gimmick or as a way to obtain social validation. And one of the things I always tell people, if you have somebody coming to you talking about racial injustice, and they seem to care about it, but at the same time, they're extremely cruel or abusive to another group, that's not real. That is not real compassion and empathy. A person who has compassion and empathy has compassion and empathy for everyone. And they won't simply be concerned about one thing. Yes, they will try to fight racial injustice, but they're not going to do it by turning around trying to cause problems over here. So what we have today, we have identity politics and people trying to take advantage of not just this issue, but many, many issues. And they're trying to stoke the fire. And I think it's very, very dangerous. I believe we live in a dangerous time in the United States because that, in a way, part of it's because of social media has opened up the door for everybody to say anything they want. And what's happened, in a way, it's a good thing, but on the other hand, it's also revealing some of the aspects of humanity that really are not very flattering.
Yeah, I agree. Let's go to another book.
Okay.
Which one should we pull up?
Okay, let's go with Golden Chalice, the one over here on the end, because that one has caused a huge amount of interest. When I was
Yeah.
working on Because I'm Black with Taiwo Fagbahangbi, he lives in West Africa, and we were talking about what it's like there. And one thing that kept striking me as odd, I said, why is the tomb of the Queen of Sheba in West Africa and not over in Ethiopia or Yemen, where she was supposedly the queen? And we started looking into it, and we found out some fascinating things. We found out that that although Christianity does not have this information, or is not widely known within Christianity, according to the Middle Eastern traditions and literature in Ethiopia and Yemen and throughout Africa, the Queen of Sheba and King Solomon were actually married. And they had a son named Ben Sira, who became known as Prince Menelik. And so I had heard this information, but I didn't know too much about it. And so I decided to do a little bit of research. And the deeper I got, the more fascinating it became. They had an empire that was 1 million square miles, took up Yemen and Ethiopia, but it was a traveling kingdom. King Solomon had a roving kingdom, and they would travel throughout Africa. And he was a benevolent king, is what you would call him, and the Queen of Sheba was the same. But so I started looking then in Jewish literature and found it in the Midrash. So in fact, it was documented in Jewish literature as well that they were married. And so I dug deeper and found out that according to the tradition, the book Song of Songs was actually written by the Queen of Sheba and King Solomon as a duet. So if you look at some of the language, you'll see it's a woman writing to a man, and then the other part is a man writing to a woman. And the assumption among most people has always been King Solomon wrote the whole thing. And I said, well, if he did, he's schizophrenic, because it doesn't make sense, right? So we started looking at that a little bit, and she even identifies herself as a black woman married to King Solomon. And so I dig a little bit deeper, and the more I find, it just gets more and more fascinating. The Yoruba people, who this particular book is about, many believe that the name Yoruba is actually derived from the name Yehuda, which was given to them by a neighboring tribe because they were from the tribe of Judah. Yehuda is Hebrew for Judah, and King Solomon was in the tribe of Judah. So we look further and we find more and more fascinating things. We find that the Queen of Sheba is buried in an area called Ijebu, in Nigeria. Well, the Jebusites were people who occupied Jerusalem when King David first came there. So we look at that part of the tradition, and the deeper we go, the more fascinating it gets. We just keep finding more and more like this. Then I start finding out that missionaries have said that when they went to West Africa, they were amazed that they had so many Jewish traditions. They were using Jewish, 8th-day circumcision, blowing the shofar before battles, many things that were done in the ancient Israelites. So what we did, we took a lot of these traditions and incorporated history, what we could find in history and in literature and in scripture, and created a story of what we believe may have occurred in the year 1617, when they drove the Atlantic slave trade out of West Africa, and were able to keep them out for almost 100 years, about 75 years. They were able to keep them out. And they never did get back into West Africa the way they did in South Africa. We did have slaves from that area, but they were never able to establish apartheid like they did in South Africa. And so what we believe, what I think the evidence, we can't say that this is true, but I think the evidence is more probable than not that many of the West Africans, including the Igbo, the Bantu, the Zulu, a lot of these tribes are actually descended from this, what they call the Solomonic Empire. Recently, I found a Jewish group in Uganda who has the same tradition, that they're descended from the empire that the Queen of Sheba and King Solomon had. So this story just goes everywhere. So we created a story about how they resisted two sisters and a cousin resisted the Atlantic slave trade. They took 2,700 warriors and took on 20,000 invaders and drove them out of West Africa. We used live models to do it. We used actual models from West Africa. Alua Dalapo Jagade was one of them. Alua Toby Bajai and Taiwo Fagbo Hungbi. Those are the people you're seeing on the front of the book. And the book is made with over 100 photographs of the different, putting on the attire and so on. If a person gets the ebook, it's actually full color. The paperback and the hard copy, it's in black and white. But the story is how they saved Africa, basically saved West Africa from the Atlantic slave trade at that time.
What an incredible story. I love it. I'm hooked
Wow.
immediately. So, Is the assumption then that the Yoruba, so we're looking at Nigeria, kind of that region of Africa, that Solomon actually traveled that far, or more like the cultures and customs kind of made it that far into to Western Africa?
I believe the evidence indicates that he actually traveled that far. And if you look, if you go and read about King Solomon, they always talked about his tents. And when I was a child, I said, "What are they talking about his tents? Well, didn't he have a palace, right?" Well, he had that traveling kingdom, and the Solomonic Empire then that lasted until I think 1940s in various forms. That was what they did. They traveled throughout Africa, all through Africa, and that is how they maintained things. I believe most likely they did travel that far, and you're talking about thousands of miles, but they would travel like an entire city of people. Thousands and thousands of people would go together, and the evidence I think is very strong that this is a true account.
And if you read the Song of Songs, not only are they traveling, but it's like a big party.
That's
They're
right,
having a great time.
all the time.
I think I can relate to Queen Sheba as an author because like all of those poems are like very sexual, but it's all like food metaphors.
Yes,
And maybe
that's
maybe it's
right.
because I love food so much. I'm like, oh, this really I understand this a little bit better.
Yeah. Well, apparently, they were very benevolent. And what I understand, they were very benevolent. And by the way, I ran across something else very, very interesting recently is that some historians believe that Bathsheba, King David's wife, was from Jebu, was from the Jebu people. And so Sheba is also short for Bathsheba, meaning that she had the same name as Bathsheba. Now, they wouldn't have been mother and daughter because if King Solomon married her, they would not have done that in Jewish culture. But most likely, if that's true, then that would have been a connection. Of course, other people believe that she was Jewish, Bathsheba was Jewish, and so on. But that's just a theory. These are all theories, kind of like King Arthur's legends. We don't really know for sure. But I wanted to give African people something to look at, something that would be fascinating to them. And they love it. In West Africa, the people over there just absolutely love it. In fact, the Ministry of Education is looking at it tomorrow as possibly inclusion in their school system. So it's a book that's very popular in Africa.
It's so fun to think about, and what a great premise for a novel. I was familiar with Ethiopia, Haile Selassie, he claimed lineage through Menelik too,
Yes,
that he was a direct descendant. And there's, rumors that the Ark of the Covenant is in
it's in it.
Ethiopia. At least
That's
they
right.
say it is.
Yeah,
So what a fascinating wrinkle to see it pop up in Nigeria. But, I think there's so much that's lost to history about like the inner communication and exchange of all these cultures going back and forth. It's usually the wars that get reported, but the parties, like who's reporting on that?
that's right. That's right. We hear
DW
only
Duke.
what's reported. Unless somebody
Yeah,
goes in and digs, we don't find it. Yeah, that's true.
100%. Great. And then we have the last prophecy. Tell me about this.
The last prophecy will be out in within the next couple of weeks. That's a story about a young Palestinian woman and a Jewish man who, when he was very young, his parents were killed. His family was killed by terrorists in just outside of Gaza. And he goes to medical school at Washington University in St. Louis, and he meets her name is Alzera, his name is Aaron. They meet in medical school, but they're both Orthodox, meaning they cannot have a relationship, and they both know that, and so they refuse to act upon their emotions, but they fall deeply in love. Ultimately, they both wind up going back to the Middle East. He winds up as a medical officer in the IDF, and she winds up ultimately working at a hospital in Iran. And then that part of the book takes place in the year 2029 because it hasn't happened yet. Israel and Iran wind up in a major war. And he winds up under her care as his physician in the hospital prison there in Iran. And then what happens beyond that is the punchline of the story. But you go through that whole process. They hadn't seen each other for 5 years, and suddenly they're back together again, and then they go through a very traumatic experience, but a very good experience.
And this one is yet to be released?
This will be released in a couple of weeks. And there's an interesting article in the appendix that I would encourage everybody to take a look at because it does have some information in there that no one has ever seen before that I think would be fascinating to a lot of people.
Can you give us a little hint?
Well, what I'll tell you is there is Daniel chapter 12 in the Tanakh. Daniel chapter 12 talks about something that would happen thousands of years later. And it gives the precise timing of when those events would occur. And in fact, those events exactly line up with events that occurred during World War II. And so the book outlines it to the day. I mean, to the day. And when people look at that, and everybody that says it, most of them are just kind of bewildered. And they say, well, this can't just be coincident. The probability of something like this being real is millions to one. So there's got to be something to this. So it does get people's attention. And I just want to get people thinking. I want to get people to think, that's all.
You don't shy away from controversial topics, do you?
No, I don't.
No. You dive right into the middle of it. I love it. It's great. And I really appreciate the tour of those books. We're now at the time in the podcast where we're going to the lightning round. Are you prepared for the lightning round?
I am. It sounds like a game show.
This is the game show portion of it.
Okay.
How has your experience as an attorney given you superpowers in your role as an author and film producer? And then maybe the flip side of that, where has it worked against you?
I think probably the one thing you learn in law is the need for accuracy and integrity in research. And that I think has really helped me with my writing because I don't like to include something that is going to be proven incorrect. I want to make sure that it's something that is as accurate as possible. And I think you get that from the law. When you're preparing for trial, you can't put in, false information. If you make a false statement in court and you know it's a false statement, you can actually get in trouble with be disciplined for it with the state bar. So I think one thing that has taught me is that everything you do when you're writing, researching, whatever, try to be as truthful as you can. Without truth, there's no integrity. Without integrity, there's never going to be a solution to anything. So I think that it helps that way. And then, of course, just having knowledge of the law is helpful as you navigate the publishing world. And in my case, of course, with the motion picture production company and so on, it's good to have that legal background.
You bet.
I can't really think of any
Is there any
negative
way
things
that
it's
legal
brought.
background hurt? Yeah.
I can't
Any way
really
that legal background is a challenge?
I other than the fact that it's hard to slow down and work never stops. Other than that, not really. I don't think it really interferes with what I do. I think it enhances it.
Amazing. Now, we love to ask, is there a person that you could meet, in the past or present, for a conversation? Who would it be and why? But we're not going to ask you that question. Rather, I'd like to ask something personal for you. So if I was to come over to where you are and we go get a bite to eat, where are we going? What are we eating?
Depends where we are. If we're right here in town, probably just one of the local restaurants, I like different kinds of food. We have some great Chinese cuisine. We don't have any kosher Jewish restaurants that I'm aware of in Temecula, at least not that I've heard of. I'm in Temecula, which is about 60 miles from LA. But we have some great Mexican restaurants. So it would be kind of a wide variety of choices.
Start a little sushi, maybe move on some tacos.
Yeah, sure.
Sounds like LA to me.
Yeah.
Amazing. If you could start your career over again, would you change anything?
I don't really think I would. Maybe one thing that I might do differently. When I was an undergrad at the University of Michigan, I knew I wanted to do law, but I was kind of playing around. I took some courses in the medical school, thought about becoming a neurosurgeon. I did look at other possibilities, and I was accepted and enrolled into the doctoral program at the Institute of Public Policy. Gerald Ford had just started that. He was a graduate of Michigan. He played football for Michigan. And he had developed the Institute of Public Policy. I was looking at getting a joint degree from the University of Michigan Law School and from the Institute of Public Policy. And Then I decided that would have been a 5 or 6 year program. I decided just to go ahead and do the normal 3 year law stint. I went to Washington University and did that. I think if I had it to do over again, I might have slowed down and pursued that doctorate as well as the law degree. But other than that, I can't really think of anything that I would do differently.
Yeah. There's still time. Any aspirations to go get that law degree or that PhD now?
Well, ironically, I met Gerald Ford several years later in Palm Springs, and one of the things he said goes, "Hey, we're still holding that place for you." But I thought about it, but I never did go
No
back.
kidding.
Yeah.
Incredible. Amazing. Now, we love to give shout outs to charitable organizations on the show, and I know there's a couple that are important to you. So, 70 Nations of Jerusalem and the Institute for Children's Aid. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about those organizations.
Okay. The Institute for Children's Aid is an organization that works with the Office of Refugee Resettlement, and they help children who are in a place where they lose their parents in war or whatever the case may be, and they help them find a home and immigrate to the United States. And they also place children adoptions. They began as an adoption agency many years ago, and they've always worked with children in many different capacities. So it's both in terms of child placement and in terms of foster care. And I'm on the board, and I've been on the board for many years. Actually, my wife is the founder. So that means a lot to me, that organization. 70 Nations Jerusalem is an organization that is working with a Knesset Sanhedrin. The idea is essentially to communicate what we were talking about a while ago, that all of the conflicts that exist in religion would not exist if everybody got back to their core principle of empathy. And so what we would like to do is give people an opportunity to meet people of other faith and understand that, they're not like I read about. They're not like I saw in the movies. These are normal people. They eat, they sleep, they do everything I do, just like I do. And so large part of what we're doing is to help people overcome that. We would like to have a unity center in Jerusalem. We've had a donation of a site for that, where we'll have a library, and it'd be like a hotel where people can come and stay and just visit with other people. And then there will be counselors who can talk to anyone that wants to in their specific religion. The idea is not to try to merge religions or say there's different all the same. The idea is just to help people overcome the conflict that often arises. For example, that we see as a result largely today from radical Islam is a real problem, and that needs to be addressed. And because of that problem, people look and they think that all Muslim people are the same, when in fact the people who are violent and engage in these terrorist activities are a very, very small minority of the Islamic people. So what we want to do is just give people an opportunity to look at the humanity of one another and get past a lot of these barriers, which are typically religious or political in nature. And then we also provide assistance like financial assistance, medical care, those kinds of things to people in need, largely in Gaza, what we were doing there.
Amazing. Yeah, I'm optimistic kind of person, and I believe that empathy and compassion are at our core,
Right.
and it's kind of like a muscle. It's kind of
That's
like
it.
that spinning back. You got to do that spinning
Yeah.
back kick 10,000 times if you want to get good at it. And empathy and compassion is the same kind of muscle you got to work out, and by doing small things, education, that's how I think people grow in empathy. And I want to thank you for the work that you're doing. I mean, you could do absolutely anything you wanted, and you've spent so much time and attention to bringing people together and telling these stories that really need to be told so that, the culture can heal together. So I'm grateful for that, DW. It was great to get to know you a little bit.
Appreciate that. It's good to get to know you as well. I
You
like your
bet.
thought
What
process.
are the Thank you. What's the best place for people to find your books or to connect with you online?
A really quick place, I have a website called dwduke.com. Real simple, dwduke.com. They can find me there, and if they want to reach out to me personally, I'm easy to find on, excuse me, easy to find on the internet. There's a lot of articles and things, and it's pretty easy to find.
Tremendous. DW, this has been exceptional. Thank you so much for joining me on the podcast.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.